I'm Kristen, this is Fabio, and this is our dog Yoda. We're looking for adventure and freedom in harbors unknown, but for now, we're starting in our own backyard. We sold our dream home of 16 years that we remodeled with love and attention to every detail, along with most of our possessions, and moved on to our Catamaran Wanderlust across the canal. We're a couple of dreamers with a longing to explore the world's natural wonders, food, and cultures. To live by the wind, current, and the sun. Click the subscribe button to come along for the ride. Power. Fighter jets are a perfect example of how much energy is created from fossil fuel, especially when the supply is unlimited. But how do you manage power on a boat when the inputs are limited by the sun, wind, batteries, and the fuel stored on board? The energy system on the Seawind 1600 is quite complex. Seawind was very helpful, specifically Shane Grover, in educating us about the different configurations, ultimately helping us decide which system we thought would work best for us. We're here with Shane from Seawind today to discuss the various configurations and the pros and cons of each. Without further ado, here is Shane.
Hi guys, thanks for having me on board today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us.
No problem. I understand you had a few questions about the electrical system on the 1600.
Yeah, a lot of people have had an interest in the different configurations for setting up the electrical system. Like, can you do without a generator? What if you add more solar? So we thought it would be helpful to kind of go through, like you were super helpful to us and took us through basically like considering, okay, what are your consumption habits on board, and then what kind of electrical generators are you going to have on board? And so I think it would just be helpful maybe to kind of start from the beginning and take people through that process.
Yeah, sure. So with the 1600, we've found that no two boats are the same. Everybody has different requirements, different equipment, different demands, and a different way of using a boat and living aboard. So we've had to develop a method to cope with these different specifications and variations, and be able to ensure that everybody's boat works correctly despite the differences between them. So unlike our smaller boats, which are far more similar, but they go out the door with very similar options and a narrower range of differences between the most highly spec'd and least spec boats. And so the general system works quite well as a standard, regardless of the options that you have on those boats. The 1600 doesn't work that way. It's we're talking a much bigger boat, higher loads, and more demanding equipment. So we've developed a system to ensure that we get the right spec for each boat. And basically that starts by finding out what the required consuming options are. So consuming options are things that draw power, things like a microwave, an oven, a washing machine, air conditioning, things like that. So we're really mainly we are actually looking at all the equipment, but the critical items, I think, are the AC loads. That's really where we have to make sure that the system works. The DC loads they all fairly standard. They seem to work without much consideration for the rest of the system. So we're really looking at the AC loads as the main focus to make sure that the system will work with the equipment added. So that's the first thing we need to look at. Next, we look at storage. So the standard boat comes with AGMs. AGMs are fine. We need to consider how much equipment is being drawn and what power is then going back into the system when we look at the generators in the next stage. But obviously on your boat, you've got lithium batteries. So that opens up a whole world of possibilities. So we've got lithium batteries added. And by adding lithium batteries, that there's actually a two-in-one option. It adds the storage, it also adds the generating capacity from the engines. So you've got the two additional alternators on the engines going into those batteries. So that actually adds more generation to your boat in taking those lithium batteries. And I think that works out to be it's a 2 times 130 amp alternators. So up to factoring without factoring in efficiency loss, up to a 260 amp of charge with both engines. So then once we've got the consumers and the stories worked out, now we can work out that, okay, you could turn everything on and your boat will run for X amount of hours or minutes, depending on the size of the battery bank and the size of the equipment. But now we actually need to really look at, this is the important factor, the charging ability, the generators. It doesn't matter what size, what type of batteries, what size battery bank you have. You could have 5,000 amps of storage. Eventually it'll run out if you're not putting anything back into it. And that's that. I think people tend to lose sight of that a little bit and they think, oh, I want more batteries, I want more batteries. If you can't charge it, it doesn't matter how many you've got, you're eventually going to run out and need to fill them up. It's like a tank of fuel. You still have to put something back into it. So we then look at the generating equipment, and there's a number of different options we have, and there's a number of different options available in the market. But we're looking at things like, firstly, obviously, do you have a generator? A generator basically answers all concerns. If you've got a generator, you can put power into the boat. We look at the alternators that come with the lithium batteries. And now this doesn't really, if you didn't have lithium batteries, additional alternators aren't going to gain you much, because you also have to consider that AGMs have a limiting charge rate of around 60 amps. So it's about what the standard alternators would be putting out anyway, or probably even slightly less. Whereas AGMs are over 600. So sorry, lithium batteries are over 600 amps. So lithium batteries can take whatever you throw at it. And that's why when you go to lithium, we can then really start to look at, okay, how can we get charge into these batteries? And let's try to get as much charge as we can. Rather than putting a big bank, let's try and get lots of charge into those batteries. So you've got almost an ever going system. Okay, so you've got things like your generator, we've got the alternators on the engines. Of course, solar is a big factor as well. How many solar panels, how many solar regulators we have on board. There's also options like wind vanes or hydro generators. We don't really deal with them so much because the output is fairly low compared to the other options. So we're focusing more on solar and more on gaining power from our engines when we're running our motors. So they're really the main generating items we look at. And we then need to make sure that this is all balancing out. So we go through the process and we'll look at the options that you want. And we start there. What do you want? What do you want to use on board? And then we'll work with you to help you find out how we can power that and how we can make sure that system works. Probably the big item up for discussion at the moment is whether to go for a generator or not.
Exactly.
And and again, it comes down to how you use the boat and your lifestyle. You can run a boat like this without a generator, but you have to be far more conscious of the use. You have to be far more conscious of the equipment on board, how much you're drawing, and you have to be more restrained. You can't just run everything when you want it. You have to consider. Was it a sunny day today or a cloudy day? If it's a cloudy day, you're probably not going to be able to run your electric oven and things like that. Whereas with a generator, you've got that on-tap power, and you can use the boat more like a home where it's ready to go.
Yeah, we like having the generator.
We like that option, especially here in South Florida because of the air conditioning.
Right.
Excuse me. Even at anchor, sometimes there's no wind. You need some.
Yeah, and you're basically running the air conditioning for 8 hours a day or more. Yeah, and that's the sort of scenario where you just can't get around it. Air conditioning does draw a lot. Now we've worked out how to get the draw down to a level that can be taken through the batteries, but you still have to consider whether that is something that you want or not. And if you are running air conditioning all day long, you need to consider how to put power back into it to keep it up.
And in fact, that was one of the questions, whether we could run the AC through the batteries, and if so, how long for, right? And you and I had talked in the past about it for about 3 hours, I think was kind of like the number that you had come up with.
Yeah, basically running, I think obviously you've got the advantage on the 1600 of having 3 aircon units, so you can decide how much you're pulling the boat and how much power you're drawing. If you're trying to cool the whole boat, you're going to have a very short period of time that you can run off the batteries alone. If you're just trying to keep the temperature down a little bit at night in the owner's cabin, then you're only using one of those 3 aircon units, so you are having a lower draw. I think from memory, we worked out that the system would run for about, and again, it depends on the other things that are happening and the size of the bank, but the size of a typical bank like what you've got, I think it's 760 amps.
Yep.
I think we can get around 6 to 8 hours running on night mode with one of the aircon units.
Yep. So that's good.
Very good. It's very good.
Yeah, but obviously the next day when you wake up, you're waking up with a fairly low battery, and you have to be able to then put that charge back in the next day. If you can't put the charge back in the next day, it's a pointless endeavor. You'll only be able to do it one day, and then you'll be trying to put the power back in for the rest of the month. Yeah.
Yes. Although we've seen that recharging the batteries with the engine is really, really rapid. It's just incredible how fast.
It's actually more efficient than the generator.
The generator, yeah. It's just impressive how quick the running the engine just charges the batteries right up.
Yeah. And then you've got the 80 horsepower upgraded motors, which they've just got so much power to burn that why not take advantage of that?
Right. Yeah, no, I think that we have found that the generator is useful, of course, to just that kind of constant usage of the AC, or if we're cooking in the oven, for example. I think it's good to start the generator for a little bit and kind of keep the batteries topped up.
Yeah. The generator definitely makes life on board more. Makes it easier. It makes it more predictable. You just turn the generator on, you run, and as long as you've got fuel, you're all happy.
Right.
You don't really have to do so much monitoring.
Yeah, I think that some of our listeners and viewers are concerned with the weight of the generator. So the added weight and how would that eventually impact performance of the vessel,
Yep.
Yeah, look, of course, really like any sailboat, but catamarans in particular, the lighter they are, the faster they are. So yes, keeping weight down is a good thing if you can. You also have to consider if you didn't have a generator, you probably would have more batteries to compensate. So it's not a straight loss of weight. You still would be lighter, but it's not a straight swap out of no generator and then I've saved all that weight. You still have to put some weight back in somewhere. But then it really comes down to how you're using the boat. I mean, there's lots of things you can do to save weight, but you could not have a washing machine.
Right.
You probably would like a washing machine.
Right.
And then there's lots of things like that.
Yeah. The people that don't get a generator, they probably won't have a washing machine either.
Yeah, because they probably cannot run the washer without the generator.
Yeah.
And I also don't know if it's wise to run the engine idling just to make energy, just to run a washing machine or to run some other piece of equipment. I think that the Yanmar 80 are not designed to be like running at low speed for an extended period of time rather than with not a lot of load. Am I correct?
For an extended period of time, that's correct. For an hour here or there, that's okay. The main thing is you need to get it under load. So if you were going to run the engine for the purpose of just putting charge into the boat, the main thing to do to keep the life of the engine is just to vary the revs. Don't just run it at idle for all day. Just vary the revs throughout the day, so you are actually getting it up to its proper operating loads.
We did get a few other questions from viewers. One was specific to the air conditioning unit. Robin says that he understands that Seawind specs Velair AC units with variable speed brushless motors, and these are much more efficient than traditional Dometic models. It'd be interesting to hear how much better they are from a power consumption standpoint and how well they work on batteries.
The statement is correct. The Velair units, and this is the reason that we swapped over to Velair a few years ago, because they're inverter driven, they're more efficient than the traditional marine aircon units. So basically that means that your traditional marine aircon will, you set the temperature, and 1 degree below that temperature, the system will be off. 1 degree or 2 degrees over that temperature, the system will kick on, and it will run until it gets down to the selected temperature, and it will shut off. So when it's running at its full output. So the draw, when it is running, is always high, which puts more loads on things like your inverters, and that's really why we couldn't run through the batteries previously, because actually it was surpassing the ability of the inverters.
Yeah.
With the inverter-driven unit, the Velair unit, it runs at a variable speed, so it will increase speed as it needs to, when they come in very hot, and then it will slowly reduce the speed, but it won't really be shutting on and off. It'll vary its output in accordance to the temperature. So for the majority of the time it's actually running at a much lower draw. Therefore, it's not running at 100% of the, it's rarely running at 100% of its maximum draw. It's more running at a more manageable level.
Very interesting.
Makes sense.
Yes, makes sense.
Next question. One person asked if we'd considered the flexible solar panels, and we really haven't considered the flexible solar panels, and just wondering if you guys recommend them as an option, or if you really recommend the standard solar panels.
Yeah, look, I think it comes down to a number of aspects. The flexible solar panels, size for size, so let's say a 1 foot by 1 foot panel.
Sure.
Size for size, the glass panels are more efficient. So the aluminium framed rigid panels, they are more efficient. But with a curved flexible panel, we can cover more surface area for a number of reasons. One, it can meet the contours of the deck. 2, you can walk on it, so we don't need to leave as much gap for walking space, which we do with the rigid panels. So we compensate with the lower efficiency by being able to cover more surface area. And then it comes down to the aesthetics. So it's a personal decision again. Ultimately, we have now worked out how to get more power through flexible panels than rigid panels, because we're maximizing all the surface area that we could cover. But it comes down to do you want maximum efficiency, or do you want maximum output? And then there's the aesthetics of the two differences, and the practicality of being able to walk on it or not walk on it.
Sure.
Interesting. Yeah.
David asked, so lithium batteries have been used. Yes, we have lithium batteries on board. And he says a lot of manufacturers may not be up to the real requirements yet, or the USA standards may not have yet caught up. Have you encountered anything like this, or do you feel that now lithium has been around long enough, and so US standards or global standards are really kind of up to par and would be able to work with lithium?
Yeah, I'm not sure I completely understand the question, but from the last 10 years or so, when lithium has been introduced into boats, there's certainly been some horror stories out there of systems that haven't worked or have failed or have needed constant modifications to get them to work. And I guess in a sense, Seawind came to the party fairly late on taking on lithium. For a number of years while lithium was out there, we weren't taking it on as an option from the factory because there were so many horror stories out there, and there didn't seem to be a proven formula. I know that at the time there were boats that obviously were having it and it was working great, and there were boats that also were having lithium and it wasn't working great. We really got involved with lithium once Mastervolt had a complete system, and that's really how we work. We can't, as an OEM manufacturer, we can't build boats with bits and pieces from all over the place. What ends up happening is if something fails, everybody points fingers at the other supplier.
Exactly.
And with Mastervolt getting on board with their lithium system and that being completely integrated into the Mastervolt system, which all our equipment is Mastervolt or BP, which is of the same parent company, and then also being compatible with the C-Zone system, it just made sense at that time that it was a worthy option. And we found it to be very, very successful. And it's with it being integrated into that system, it's also quite intuitive. You can really, all the equipment shares information, and you can really get a good overview on how the system operates.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we were building the boat, we spoke about the option of getting lithium batteries here in the States, a different make, and you explained very clearly that what you just said again, that a system that is already integrated is going to be more reliable, and I think that answers the question that this viewer has asked. It's a system that is proven here in the United States, and Mastervolt is a worldwide company. So
yeah, and I'm not saying that you couldn't buy batteries from somewhere else and put them in and have them work, but we don't know that, and we do know that this system works very well. Yeah. And ultimately, we have to, when we build our boats, regardless of the options that are on it, we have to make sure that they work, and it's just not feasible for us to be constantly putting different combinations of things, because ultimately there is a huge risk factor when you do that, and we need to make sure that your boat works.
Exactly. The final question we have is, how about using a single diesel engine with an extra alternator to charge the battery bank, and then an Ocean Volt electric motor with
regen, regen electricity. It's an interesting, it's a novel concept. Never heard that, but it's an interesting perspective to think about having one diesel on one side and an electric motor on the other side. So when you end up sail, you do some regeneration of power, and then you can use that to motor around. So it's I've given some thought, and tell me what you think. You still need to carry diesel, which is the
usually carry diesel. Yeah, we've spent quite a bit of time looking into similar systems, and at this stage, I think what we're seeing with a boat the size of the 1600, the available electric drives are a little bit undersized. Manageable if you're just trying to get out of a marina and then off you go, and you're not really motoring around, and you don't care how long it takes you to get somewhere, you'll just wait for the wind, then absolutely no problem.
Yeah.
However, most people are a little bit more time conscious, and aren't so free to just float around. Therefore, from what we've seen at this stage, certainly for a boat of this size, you really need to have a generator. And I think even if you had one diesel engine and one electric engine, I think you would probably still need a DC generator to get the loads required, to get the power required. Those engines draw a lot of power, and the regeneration, the solar, all of that, it's a little bit of a drop in the ocean at this stage compared to how much it draws. So I think you still would need a diesel generator if you were looking to be able to use the boat the way that you use a diesel boat, which is having power on demand.
Right. Yep. It's very interesting. Like same thing with the watt and see and extra panels. I mean, somebody who's really dedicated to running a zero emission boat, squeezing every single drop of every single electron that can be drawn out of the sun or the wind or the forward motion of the boat during sailing. I think it's a challenging yet probably very, very interesting way of running a boat. I don't think we are there yet. We are, and I think in our boat we're very happy with the way we set it up. Yep. We've been on it for a few months, and we enjoy the fact that when we're at anchor and the battery's a little low, just power the generator, make a soup in the oven, cook something in the oven, run the washer at the same time. Because the thing is that when the generator is running, you have excess energy. You have a lot of energy that you can use. You can really use for other stuff at the same time. Yeah.
Well, I think that about does it. Thank you so much for your time today.
No problem, guys. Yeah, happy to be here.
Yes, it's so. Are you coming down to Key West or?
No, unfortunately, no travel for me for the foreseeable future.
Oh, so sad. And then the
cancer. No, we're in a good situation here in Vietnam.
Yes.
We've had very, very few cases all year, and most of the time there's been 0 cases. At the moment, there's been no cases for probably 2 months now or more.
That's amazing.
So life here is fairly normal, with the exception that there's pretty strict restrictions on coming into the country. So if I was to leave, it'd be very difficult to come back.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, even the Miami Boat Show, unfortunately, has been canceled, which is terrible.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's basically 12 months of boat shows now cancelled.
Right. Well,
Mm.
all right. Well, it's
Oh,
great talking.
Time to go sailing.
That's right.
Exactly. Thank you very much for your help and everything. It's been great.
No worries. See you guys.
Cheers.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.
See you.